Throughout the summer months, a good portion of the summer months, you fish in deep weed lakes. It holds tremendous schools with big bass. It's well worth the effort to go find them. It's the second week of August. It's actually considered the dog days of summer. A lot of people would consider it a relatively tough time of the year to fish. I'm fishing with a longtime friend, Mark Fisher, who is actually sort of a lure designer for Rapala. Over the years, Mark and I have done quite a few different segments over the years. We've done deep cranking. What did we do last year? We did finesse worming.
Yeah, we did.
For smallmouth bass.
Yeah.
But today we're going to look at sort of an interesting tactic associated to bass fishing, and we're fishing on Northern Natural Lake in Minnesota. We're blessed to live in the land of 10,000 lakes, and we have a lot of deep weed lakes. And what we're going to look at is the art of jig fishing for bass. And a lot of people would consider that, well, that's a really boring subject. Well, the only thing is, if you want to become a really good bass fisherman, you have to know how to fish a jig. And Mark and I are going to look at all different strategies for the use of bass jigs. Unquestionably, bar none, one of the best baits you have in your tackle box. Okay, we're on the spot here.
As head of field promotions for Rapala, Hall of Fame angler Mark Fisher is a familiar face and fierce competitor at bass tournaments throughout the upper Midwest. Behind the scenes, he's also a world-class lure designer who's heavily involved in the development of Rapala's new products. Few people on earth have a better understanding of bringing new lure concepts and characteristics to the marketplace. His long-term goal is for everyone's tackle box to contain everything they need to catch fish worldwide. We can hardly wait to see what he comes up with next.
Here we go, James.
Well, that's a sign.
We've got a little cooperation going on.
I like that.
It's a nice fish.
Yeah. Ooh, a palomino even. Those
He
are my
is.
favorites.
He's got a beauty mark.
Mm-hmm.
There you go.
Beautiful
Nice
fish.
little starter. Beautiful coloring. Look at, he's been down on the bottom, banging, trying to eat rocks, or what's ever in the rock, I should say.
How did that little nipper hit it?
Actually, I was crawling it on the bottom.
Oh, is that
1
right?
ounce jig, and it just kind of slipped off the side of the weed. And boom, he was on.
Ooh, there's one.
He's wounded.
I'm not. I got it. Wow. Ooh.
Oh, that's a good one.
There's a leaping Lena right there.
Leaping Lena?
Yeah. Oh boy, look at that guy there.
Oh, he's a scrapper.
Well, that's a little bit better one there. You know, one thing when you're talking about jig fishing is the weight of the jig is really critical. Right now, Mark and I are throwing really big jigs, 3/4 and you know, on the heavy end of the spectrum. And a lot of bass anglers, it's amazing, don't carry them in their tackle box. And there's different points in times where that increased weight is really critical to trigger more bass in the striking. I'll get this guy back in the water. Come here, buddy. Look at that. Nice fish. Look at that.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of these northern natural lakes, we have really a lot of clear water and dense, deep weed beds. And actually, I don't know for sure to say that we use heavier jigs than a lot of, you know, than probably 90% of North American bass anglers, but we do use a lot of really heavy jigs. When you look at my jig box, my tackle box, I have a wide spectrum of different weights from really light finesse jigs to the mid-range, you know, those 3/8 quarters, halves, and then the really heavy 3/4 and 1 ounce. And it's an interesting thing at certain points in time, that heavy jig just has a tremendous, like what Mark was saying, to be able to not only fish through the cover to penetrate it, but to actually trigger the fish into biting. They like that big weight. And it may be something, I like the idea of what you were talking about, because of the habitat is so lush, it's for them to be able to find the bait.
For years, they've quietly taken you where the fish are. But now the silence is about to break. With the incredible new iPilot Link, your Minn Kota and Humminbird can communicate with each other. So you can hold on a spot like an electronic anchor. Record and return to waypoints and paths. Follow any Lake Master depth contour and more, all automatically and all from your Humminbird or the Link remote. They talk and you'll be speechless.
First one. Oh, big one. Look at that.
All fishermen are created equal. Some just use better fishing line.
Closed captioning provided by Northwest Ontario, Canada.
And I like the idea of what you were talking about because of the habitat is so lush. It's for them to be able to find the bait.
It's really funny when you think about water clarity and the colors, and you think about water clarity and the speed of the controlling the rate of the jig. I mean, there's oftentimes, a lot of times that we slow the fall of the jig up manually after you make a cast or a pitch, just to make sure it just kind of does a nice, simple fall. But even in clear lakes where you get the real thick vegetation, like some of the coontail that's now growing, you know, to 22, 24 feet in some of our lakes, a big jig tumbling through, it's dark down there. I mean, it's got to be completely dark, and that existence of that big jig crash and gets their attention. Talk about attention.
Oh, boy, that might be a pike. Boy, I don't know if it's a bass. It's a good one. Yeah,
It's a good
big
one.
Bass. Look at that guy there.
Attaboy.
There you go. Come here. I really calmed that guy down to really throw these heavy jigs and to be able to make it the bait be able to react. Your rod and reel and line is really critical. I got a 30-pound 832 braid on here. And that's the other thing to even fish a great big bait like that is to be able to make the bait react. I got a 7'4" heavy action rod that's really, you know, this is a 12 to 25 pound test, and I got really heavy braid on there. And then the reel itself, I like a real fast action reel. My preference is particularly for this situation, because a lot of times you're popping it up and it's falling. A lot of times the fish will hit it at the top of the fall, so what you have to do is reel down really quickly and set the hook. And that's where the fast action reel 7.3 to 1 will help you land more fish. You're just a lot faster to pick up real quick when they'll grab the bait, you know, and they'll jump out of the weeds and grab it, and a lot of times they're coming up with the bait, so you got to really reel down fast and catch up with them. You know, we're talking about the use of really heavy jigs. Realistically, a lot of professional bass anglers, you'd be really surprised on a lot of them, even when they're fishing relatively shallow water, use that heavy jig, and for a couple of different reasons. And number one is they can actually cast it a lot far more accurate. Secondly, the ability to penetrate cover. And what they do is actually adjust the drop speed of the bait with their rod, and they'll flip it into stuff and then snap it over and just follow the bait down. But it enables them to just fish more efficiently and speed too. They can move pretty quickly with the heavy baits. Even in relatively shallow water, I mean, a half-ounce bait is real common if you're fishing what, Mark, in 4 foot of water, run a half-ounce bait, depending on the cover, of course. I still am not hitting a good weed yet.
Are you gonna hit it and then go left?
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to get on it.
Yeah.
There's one. Oh,
Oh, there's one.
Oh, another nice
Attaboy,
one.
James.
Yeah, there you go. Come here, buddy.
Good one.
Whoa.
Oh, he got it.
There you go. You know, the interesting thing is right now, you know, Mark and I were going to really talk about jig fishing strategies. And we're talking about using big jigs right now when we're fishing along a deep weed edge. The interesting thing is at certain points in times, like in spring, actually the really light jig, swimming it up high where the fish are suspended high up in the weeds, can be really critical. And I know I've got buddies who have won tournaments where guys were fishing through there and they're fishing below the fish, and where the fish are at, they're suspended really high in the water column using a really light jig and swimming it up on the tops of the weeds. So it's just something that you have to think about, you know, where jigs are jigs, and everybody has them, you know, and they really don't think that much about them, but why they're the #1 bass bait in the world is for a very, very, very good reason.
You know, it's interesting what you were just saying about preparing yourself. You know, jig fishing is jig fishing is jig fishing, but in this situation, you know, coming into an area and coming right behind another guy to catch a fish is really cool, but it's also just a fun way to keep the school alive. And when you talk about thumping big jigs down in grass, there's so much commotion going on out there because James just ripped one out and the other bass are just kind of like, you know, checking your neighborhood to see where the rest of the kids went, so to speak. You got to get right back in there with another jig and stir the pot.
He's fished here for decades. He knows every hump, every drop-off, every contour. He's dedicated his entire life to understanding this single body of water, and he didn't know squat about it until 2 hours ago. AutoChart Live lets you build your own high-definition maps anywhere in the world in real time. Only with Onyx. Only from Humminbird.
We're always looking for a secret to success, like lures, legs, spots. Here's one mechanics have been using for decades to solve fuel system problems. It's Seafoam motor treatment. Seafoam helps do the few important things exceptionally well. Removes harmful engine deposits, controls moisture, stabilizes fuel for up to 2 years, and adds lubrication to fuel, so engines run cooler and last longer. To me, this stuff is like a miracle in a can.
Hey, you remember when we were hanging out last night? You know, me, you, Gail.
That's my girl.
You guys are awesome. And then you went to bed.
I was tired.
You were super tired. And then it was just me and Gail.
Mm-hmm.
Alone.
What?
Oh, yeah!
It's all in the pause. New Shadow Rap from Rapala.
There's no place like this.
The Edge is presented by these and other fine sponsors.
Right here somewhere, really close.
You know, one of the interesting things about jigs, and I think you nailed it, James, is the fact that you can use them all year round. And our season is from ice out to when the lakes ice up again. And so many different times a year predicate what you're going to use, what style of jig you may fish with. Finesse jigs, lighter jigs to tumble, well, you usually match that rate of fall with the temperatures of the water. So in the spring of the year when it's really cool, you don't want a fast dropping bait. You want something that just kind of slowly falls and stays in the fish's eye, because their metabolism is just much slower in that time of year coming out of winter. And then as it progresses through the summer months, it really gets fun, because as the weed beds develop in our region of the country, everything gets lusher and fuller, and to actually penetrate grass as guys do in the south, they're doing it shallow, pitching big heavy jigs into the mats to punch through. We have to do the same thing sometimes at depths of 15, 16 to 18 feet of water through these giant coontail beds. So the rate of the fall really sometimes is all dictated by spring, by summer, by fall, but it's truly all about how heavy that mat is that you're fishing.
You know, Mark is one of those individuals, he fishes tournaments a lot, and he really likes using chase bait patterns. And what I mean by that, crankbaits, rattlebaits, buzzbaits, spinnerbaits, high-speed presentations, which enable you to cover a lot of water really quickly and ultimately catch a lot of fish. But I can almost guarantee you, no matter what time of the year he's fishing, he has one of these little nippers and some variation of this tied on his line. You know, right now we're fishing midsummer, as I said, the dog days of summer, and these weed beds in this particular lake are growing down to about 13, 14 foot is about the deepest weeds that we've seen in here so far. But they're really thick, and these weeds come up, if you look on the depth finder, these weeds come up within 3 to 4 feet of the surface. So in other words, these weed beds are 10 foot tall. So what we're doing is going in after them with really big, heavy jigs. And the other real part of the critical part of the equation is finding them. You know what I mean? When you look around this lake here, this lake is a maze of underwater structures. There's a lot of big underwater food shelves, anywhere from 4 foot down to 12 foot, sunken islands, big points. And there's vast flats of weeds in this lake. And the really key is to figure out where on these flats are the fish going to be positioned at.
Weeds are a vitally important type of cover in most northern natural lakes. They provide cover for both game fish and forage like minnows and panfish. In the big picture, bass follow weed development seasonally. In early season, shallow bays and flats see the first weed growth. But as the water warms into the summer months, deeper main lake weed lines develop. Both forage and game fish follow this prime habitat growth within the lake seasonally.
The interesting thing is right now I'm using a Terminator grass jig, and it's a real heavy jig. This is a half ouncer, and we're fishing it probably in about 10, 12 foot of water. But the thing is I can tell, actually you get used to fishing through different types of weeds with this braided line. I can actually tell you what type of weed composition I'm fishing through. And a lot of times what he was looking at, we want specifically coontail. It looks like a raccoon's tail. This really deep green.
Good one.
Means Mark's got a big boy on there. There you go.
Oh, yeah, he's making it around.
Taking around? Ooh. He's got a real whippersnapper on there.
We got a little buddy, James. Ooh, look what's wrapped around his snoot.
I bet he's got some weeds around it.
You know, it was so funny that I popped it off the weed, let it sit to the bottom, James, and just kind of must have been just dragging it. Just what James was talking about. Different variety of vegetation is where these fish hold. Just a beautiful little chunk.
Wow.
But it is so critical. You just keep fishing and you just keep fishing, and sometimes you pop aggressively, and just like jerk baiting, when you develop cadences to try to figure out ways to trigger fish to bite, James, I think a lot of times in jig fishing you're doing the same thing. Aggressive hops, subtle hops, pulls, anything you can to try to figure a way to trigger those fish and vegetation to bite. Good to have a good skipper in the boat.
Yeah.
There's another one.
Oh, Mr. Fisher.
Here we
Come
go.
on. You don't even let your buddy get in there. Oh, he's got another whopper stopper on there. There you go. There you go, Mr. Fisher.
You don't have a buoy?
No, I don't. I got a GPS.
Mercury engine test.
Smooth, quiet power you can rely on. It's good to have Mercury behind you.
Hey, you remember when we were hanging out last night? You know, me, you, Gail.
That's my girl.
You guys are awesome. And then you went to bed.
I was tired.
You were super tired. And then it was just me and Gail.
Mm-hmm.
alone.
What?
Yeah! It's all in the paws. New Shadow Rap from Rapala.
This is the finest fishing boat I've ever been in my life, and I'm so proud because I'm the owner of this one.
As far as fishability with this boat, I'm not limited to one specific type of species. For me overall, it's a fantastic boat.
My job is simple when I'm guiding. It's to find fish and to catch fish, and to be successful at it, you need boat control, and Lund boats, they're second to none.
It's like I went to the factory, they put me in the seat and they said, what do you want? And they built it around me. This is a fishing machine.
Mercury engine test.
Easy to maintain performance you can rely on. It's good to have Mercury behind you.
The Edge is presented by these and other fine sponsors.
Good to have a good skipper in the boat.
Yeah, yeah. There's another one. Oh, Mr. Fisher.
Here we
Come
go.
on. You don't even let your buddy get in there. Oh, he's got another whopper stopper on there. Oh, there you go. There you go, Mr. Fisher.
You don't have a buoy?
No, I don't. I got a GPS.
Well, he's a long, thin one, buddy. There you go.
Oh, there's another one. Oh, see, and that's what you're talking about. Oh, whoa. I like that. They're leaping Lenas in the background here. That's one thing, you know. It can be a lot of work to go through, and for a lot of anglers, they'd get really sort of frustrated trying to figure out these different weed beds. And the thing is what you're looking for. We're looking for a specific type of edges within these weed beds, and there's a variety of different things that really have the tendency to gather bass in weed edges. Beautiful chunk there, real fatso.
Nice.
Yeah. And as you can see, there's like a school of these our buddies in there. Little chunk, look at that guy there. Ooh, I like him. Boy, that's a beautiful, look how fat they are. You can see that these fish are really sort of feeding up.
There's a wide variety of factors that tend to gather bass along the deep weed edges. Number one is forage. In other words, if no food exists, it probably will attract few, if any, bass. As we've said already, weed composition is also critical. Largemouth bass simply like certain weeds. Some of their favorites, coontail, milfoil, and cabbage. Location in the shape of a weed edge is also critical. Points and inside corners tend to gather schools of bass. Both hard bottom extensions and faster drop-off areas along the deep weed edge can also be key contact points. Irregular weed edges and hard bottom areas within weed beds can also form prime feeding zones for bass. Scouting with good electronics can really speed the fish finding process. In lakes like we're on today, there are literally miles and miles of weed edges.
One thing that's really nice, particularly for deep weed fishing situations, for a lot of different fishing situations, is on my Humminbird 858, I have this feature in here. What I can do is called depth highlight, and I'll go into my menu and I go to the chart and I go scroll down here a little bit, and I can actually highlight a specific depth range. And what I've done is actually highlighted right now from between 5 and 12 foot of water. What that means between 5 foot and 12 foot is that's where the weeds, my target weeds are. 12 foot being the deep weed edge, but what it makes it really easy as I'm moving along with the trolling motor, I'm following this bright green line, which is the edge of the deep weeds at this point in time. You know, one thing that's really critical is how you move along these edges with your trolling motor. And what I'm doing with the Minn Kota is intermittently hitting it with the deep weed edge with the depth finder, and I'm sort of watching and I'm moving along. Today we're really blessed in the fact that we got relatively calm conditions, so it makes it a lot easier for fishing. The other thing you'll notice is what we're doing, we're not making very long casts. We're making very short casts. I'm holding the boat right on the deep weed edge. Actually starts almost like directly underneath the boat, and I actually hit it and then I'll drift off of it a little bit, and Mark and I are making really short, precise casts. At this time of the year when these fish can get grouped up out on these deep weed edges, your boat control is actually really critical. It is. And it's really easy, you know, when we were talking earlier how vast these things are, it's pretty easy to miss them. Mr. Fisher, that's a better one of the day. I tell you one thing, you know, fishing and finding bass in deep weeds can be a lot of work, but I can guarantee you one thing. Throughout the summer months, a good portion of the summer months, you fish in deep weed lakes, it holds tremendous schools of big bass. It's well worth the effort to go find them.
I just finished reading another magazine article about a guy that complained to this particular school about a coach that actually prayed with a lot of his athletes. And he said, I'm offended by somebody praying like this. And you hear these stories all the time. One person is offended by this and they complain about it. They don't like to see this cross. I'm offended by that cross being there. I'm offended by the 10 Commandments in front of me. And one person complains and a whole bunch of people roll over and attorneys get involved in everything. I got to share something with you. I'm offended that they're offended by something that I believe in and is a part of my everyday life. I think that should make us even, doesn't it? Hey, from all of us here at The Edge, you have a good, safe fishing season. We'll see you on the water.